The call came on Thursday, March 28th, while I was reviewing depositions with my legal team. "Mom's calling," I told my general counsel, Patricia Morrison. "Give me 2 minutes." I stepped out of the conference room and answered. "Hi, Mom." "Rebecca, honey, we need to talk about Easter." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. That careful, diplomatic voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news disguised as reasonable planning. "What about Easter?" "Well, Richard and I have been discussing it, and we think it's best if you sit this one out." Richard, her new husband of 6 months. The Honorable Richard Whitfield, Federal District Court Judge for the Western District of Washington. "Sit it out," I repeated flatly. Richard is hosting several of his colleagues and their families. Federal judges, attorneys, very prominent people. And given your current situation, we thought it might be awkward. "Why situation?" "The divorce, honey. You're barely 6 months out. Richard's friends are all very traditional. Married couples, established families. A recently divorced woman in her 30s would just raise questions we'd rather not answer." I closed my eyes. "I see. I knew you'd understand. You're always so reasonable. Plus, Stephanie will be there with her husband and the kids. It'll be easier to present a unified, stable family image." Stephanie, my older sister. Married to a dentist, 2 perfect children, president of her PTA. The daughter who made sense. "And you think I'd ruin that image?" "I didn't say ruin. Don't be dramatic. I just think it's better if..." A text appeared on my phone. The family group chat. Stephanie had written, "Totally agree with Mom. Richard's colleagues don't need to meet the whole complicated family situation." "I have to go, Mom," I said. "Trial prep." "Oh, you're still doing that legal secretary work? Well, I suppose it keeps you busy. Anyway, we'll miss you on Sunday. I'll save you some leftovers." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the hallway of Patterson and Clark LLP, one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, and stared at my phone. Legal secretary work. I was a named partner. My name was literally on the building. Let me back up. My name is Rebecca Patterson. I graduated top of my class from Columbia Law. Made partner at 32 at Patterson and Clark, the firm I'd helped build from a scrappy boutique practice into a powerhouse corporate litigation firm with 180 attorneys across 3 offices. But to my family, I was still the disappointment. Stephanie had done everything right. Married young to Jeffrey the dentist. Had kids at the appropriate times. Bought a house in the suburbs. Joined the right committees. Her life was a carefully curated Instagram feed of achievement unlocked. I'd married at 28 to David, a software engineer I met at a Columbia mixer. We'd been happy for a while. Then his company got acquired, he made $15 million, and suddenly our marriage felt like an obstacle to his new lifestyle. The divorce was brutal. Not financially, I made my own money, but emotionally. And publicly. Tech blogs covered it. Seattle society pages whispered about it. Mom had called it unfortunate. Stephanie had called it embarrassing. Dad, before he died 3 years ago, would have called it life. He was the only one who ever understood me. When Mom started dating Richard Whitfield 8 months ago, I'd been cautiously supportive. She was lonely after Dad died. Richard seemed stable. Successful. He made her happy. Then I looked him up. The Honorable Richard Whitfield. Appointed to the federal bench 12 years ago. Conservative. Connected. And currently presiding over the docket that included one very important case. Meridian Technologies v. TechFlow Solutions. My case. I was representing Meridian Technologies, a $2.1 billion supply chain software company, in a massive intellectual property theft lawsuit against their former partner TechFlow Solutions. We were seeking $180 million in damages. It was the biggest case of my career. And it had been assigned to my mother's new husband. I'd filed a motion for Judge Whitfield to recuse himself the day I found out Mom was dating him seriously. Standard conflict of interest. He'd recused without argument. These things happen in legal circles. The case got reassigned to Judge Martin Chin. Fair. Brilliant. No nonsense. Until Judge Chin had a heart attack 2 weeks ago. Emergency reassignment back to Judge Whitfield's docket. My motion to recuse again had been denied. His clerk called my office personally. Judge Whitfield has reviewed the circumstances. Your mother's relationship with him began after the case was filed. You've had minimal contact with him personally. He sees no conflict that would warrant recusal. The trial date stands. So here we were. My $180 million case. His courtroom. Monday morning. And I wasn't invited to Easter because I'd be awkward for his colleagues. The thing about family is they freeze you in amber at whatever age you disappointed them most. For Stephanie, that was never. She was always the golden child. For me, it was probably 23 when I announced I was going to law school instead of getting married and settling down like Mom wanted. Law school is so aggressive, Mom had said. Don't you want a family? I can have both. Well, yes, but men don't like women who are too ambitious. I'd gone anyway. Columbia Law. Top 5% of my class. Recruited by 3 major firms. I chose Patterson & Clark because the founding partner, James Patterson, believed in building something rather than just joining something established. We're going to be the firm everyone wants to hire, James had said. But we're going to do it by being smarter, faster, and more creative than the old guard. He was right. I made partner at 32. The youngest in the firm's history. We'd grown from 15 attorneys to 180. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies, major tech firms, and high-stakes litigation that set precedent. When James retired last year, I became managing partner. The family response? Mom, that sounds like a lot of stress, honey. Stephanie, but who's going to raise your kids if you're working all the time? I didn't have kids. David hadn't wanted them. By the time I did, our marriage was already falling apart. They didn't ask about the cases I won. The precedents I set. The firm I'd built. They asked when I was going to settle down. My divorce finalized in September. Mom met Richard in November. They married in January. Small ceremony. I was invited but seated in the back. Stephanie was maid of honor. At the reception, Richard gave a speech about finding love again after loss. I'm gaining not just a wife but a whole family, he'd said, looking at Stephanie and her perfect children. I'm blessed. He didn't look at me once. Meridian Technologies came to us in August. Sarah Chin, their brilliant CEO, sat in my office and laid out the case. TechFlow stole our proprietary algorithms. We have documentation, code comparisons, emails from their engineers admitting they reverse-engineered our software. They used our technology to undercut our pricing and steal $180 million worth of contracts. Do you want to settle? I'd asked. No, she said. I want them destroyed. I want a jury to hear what they did. I want precedent that protects innovation. I liked her immediately. We spent 6 months building the case. My team, 4 senior associates, 2 junior partners, and 3 paralegals, worked 100-hour weeks. We had forensic analysts, technology experts, damages economists. TechFlow hired Morrison & Banks, the biggest firm in Seattle. 50 attorneys on their team. Unlimited budget. We were better. By the time we finished discovery, we had them cornered. Their own engineers' testimony contradicted their defense. Their financial records showed suspicious payments. Their code was so obviously copied it was almost insulting. Morrison & Banks tried to settle in February. $50 million. Sarah Chin laughed. We're going to trial. Trial was set for April 15th. Judge Whitfield's courtroom. I'd met with him once for a pre-trial conference. He'd been formal. Professional. He called me Miss Patterson and avoided eye contact. It was like I was a stranger. Which I suppose I was. I spent Easter alone in my apartment with Thai food and trial notes. My phone buzzed periodically with photos from the family group chat. Mom and Richard at their dining room table. Crystal and China. 20 guests in business casual Easter attire. Stephanie's kids in matching outfits. Richard with his judge friends, all of them looking distinguished and important. At 3 p.m. Stephanie posted, "Best Easter ever. So grateful for family and new beginnings." I stared at the photo. Mom was beaming. Richard had his arm around her. Everyone looked happy. Everyone who was invited, anyway. I texted my colleague Patricia. If I lose this trial tomorrow, I'm blaming it on family dysfunction. She replied, "You're not going to lose. We've buried them in evidence. Whitfield would have to be actively corrupt to rule against us. He's my stepfather," I sent back. "Who excluded you from Easter. He recuses or he rules in our favor. Either way we win." At 6 p.m. my phone rang. "How was your day, honey?" "Fine. Worked on trial prep." "On Easter?" Rebecca, you need to have some balance in your life. I bit my tongue. Anyway, I wanted to tell you, Easter was wonderful. Richard's colleagues were so impressed with Stephanie. She's such a natural hostess. And the kids were adorable. Everyone kept saying what a lovely, stable family Richard married into. That's nice, Mom. One of the other judges asked where you were. I just said you had work obligations. Much better than explaining the whole divorce situation. Right. Richard said to wish you luck tomorrow. He mentioned you have a big case in his courtroom. My stomach tightened. He mentioned it? Well, yes. He said it's some technology company dispute. Very complicated. He's hoping for a quick trial so it doesn't drag on. Mom, he shouldn't be discussing the case with you. Oh, he didn't discuss it. He just mentioned it. Anyway, I should go. Stephanie and I are doing brunch tomorrow before your trial. Good luck, honey. She hung up. I sat very still. Richard had talked to my mother about my case. The night before trial. I called Patricia. We need to file a motion first thing tomorrow morning. Before trial starts. What kind of motion? Recusal. And possibly a complaint. I arrived at the courthouse at 7 a.m. My team was already there. Patricia, 2 senior associates named James and Linda, and our paralegal coordinator, Marcus. Motion is drafted, Patricia said, handing me the document. Grounds. Judge discussed pending case with family member on the eve of trial. Conflict of interest. Appearance of impropriety. He's going to deny it. Probably. But it's on the record. At 8:30 we filed into the courtroom. Morrison and Banks had a dozen attorneys at their table. We had 5. TechFlow's CEO Richard Morrison sat behind his legal team looking smug. Saracen sat next to me perfectly calm. Ready to make history? Ready. The bailiff entered. All rise. The United States District Court for the Western District of Washington is now in session. The Honorable Richard Whitfield presiding. Judge Whitfield walked in. He looked exactly like he had at Easter in Mom's photos. Distinguished. Confident. In control. He sat. Arranged his papers. Then looked up. His eyes scanned the plaintiff's table. He saw Saracen. He saw my associates. Then he saw me. I watched the recognition hit. The slight widening of his eyes. The pause before he cleared his throat. Good morning, he said. We're here for trial in the matter of Meridian Technologies versus TechFlow Solutions. Let's begin with preliminary matters. I stood. Your Honor, the plaintiff has a motion. Proceed. Your Honor, I'm moving for your recusal from this case based on conflict of interest. Last night you discussed this case with my mother, your wife, on the eve of trial. This creates an appearance of impropriety that warrants reassignment. The courtroom went silent. Richard's face flushed. Miss Patterson, I did no such thing. Your Honor, my mother called me at 6 p.m. last night and specifically mentioned that you told her I had a big case in your courtroom today and that you hoped for a quick trial. Those are details about a pending case discussed with a family member. The lead attorney for TechFlow, Douglas Morrison, stood. Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic. Sit down, Mr. Morrison, Judge Whitfield snapped. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw something shift in his expression. Miss Patterson, approach. I walked to the bench. Douglas Morrison started to follow. Just Miss Patterson, the judge said. I stood below the bench. He leaned down. Did your mother really say that? He asked quietly. Yes, Your Honor. At 6 p.m. last night. I can provide phone records. He closed his eyes briefly. I mentioned I had a complicated trial today. I didn't discuss details. I didn't even say your name. Your Honor, you're married to my mother. You excluded me from Easter because my presence would be awkward for your colleagues. And now you're presiding over the biggest case of my career. Regardless of your intentions, the appearance of bias is unavoidable. He was quiet for a long moment. Step back, Miss Patterson. I returned to my table. Judge Whitfield looked at the courtroom. This court will take a 30-minute recess. All counsel remain available. He stood and walked out. 20 minutes later, the bailiff summoned both legal teams to chambers. Judge Whitfield sat behind his desk. His clerk stood in the corner taking notes. Let me be very clear, he began. I did not discuss the details of this case with anyone outside this courtroom. However, Ms. Patterson has raised valid concerns about the appearance of impropriety. Douglas Morrison leaned forward. Your Honor, the plaintiff is forum shopping. They want a different judge because they know you'll be fair and they need someone they can manipulate. Mr. Morrison, if you interrupt me again, I'll hold you in contempt. Morrison, shut up. The situation is this, Judge Whitfield continued. I married Ms. Patterson's mother 6 months ago. I've met Ms. Patterson exactly 3 times. Once at the wedding, once at a pretrial conference for this case, and today. I have no relationship with her. I have no bias for or against her. He paused. However, I did tell my wife last night that I had a complicated trial today. I did not name the case or the parties. But I understand how that creates an appearance problem. Your Honor, I said carefully, there's also the fact that you excluded me from Easter dinner yesterday because my presence would be awkward for your colleagues, several of whom are in the gallery today watching this trial. I gestured to the courtroom gallery, visible through the open door. 3 federal judges sat in the back row. Judge Whitfield's jaw tightened. Your Honor, Patricia added, the plaintiff isn't questioning your integrity. We're questioning whether the circumstances create an appearance of bias that undermines the proceedings. He was silent for a long moment. I'm going to deny the motion, he finally said. My heart sank. However, he continued, I'm going to make the following statement on the record. Ms. Patterson, your mother and I will have no contact during this trial. No discussions of any kind. I'll be staying at my downtown apartment, not our home. If your mother attempts to contact me about this case, I'll recuse immediately and report it. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. He looked at Morrison. And Mr. Morrison, if I hear one more insinuation that Ms. Patterson is forum shopping or playing games, I'll sanction your entire firm. She's raised legitimate concerns and handled them professionally. You will extend her the same courtesy. Yes, Your Honor. We start trial in 10 minutes. Both sides be ready. The trial lasted 6 days. Morrison and Banks threw everything at us. Motions, objections, technical arguments that required expert testimony. We buried them. Our forensic expert testified that TechFlow's code was 87% identical to Meridian's proprietary algorithms. Their own expert couldn't refute it. Our damages economist showed $180 million in lost contracts directly attributable to TechFlow's theft. Their economist tried to argue Meridian would have lost those contracts anyway. The jury didn't buy it. Sarah Chin testified for 4 hours. She was brilliant. Clear. Technical but accessible. She explained how her team had spent 3 years developing the technology. How TechFlow had been a trusted partner. How they'd betrayed that trust. Under cross-examination, Douglas Morrison tried to rattle her. Ms. Chin, isn't it true that your company has sued 3 other competitors in the past 5 years? Yes, Sarah said calmly. Because 3 other competitors stole our technology. We defend our intellectual property. That's not aggressive. It's necessary. You seem very litigious. I seem very protective of the innovation my team creates. The jury loved her. Judge Whitfield ran a tight courtroom. No nonsense. No favoritism. He sustained objections fairly. He cut off grandstanding from both sides. And he never once looked at me with anything other than professional neutrality. On day 4, my mother showed up in the gallery. I saw her during afternoon recess. She was sitting 3 rows back watching. When court adjourned, she approached. Rebecca, can we talk? Not here, Mom. Richard told me what happened. The motion. He's very upset. He should be. He created the conflict. He didn't mean to. He just mentioned he had a trial. I asked if it was your case. He barely said anything. Patricia appeared at my elbow. Mrs. Whitfield, this is inappropriate. Please don't contact Rebecca about this case. Mom looked offended. I'm her mother. I can talk to my daughter. Not about a case being heard by your husband, Patricia said firmly. If you continue, we'll have to report it. Mom's face went pale. She looked at me. You'd do that? You'd get Richard in trouble? Mom, go home. We'll talk after the trial. She left, but not before I saw tears in her eyes. Stephanie texted me that night. You're tearing this family apart over a lawsuit. Is it really worth it? I didn't respond. Closing arguments were on Friday. Douglas Morrison spoke for 2 hours. He argued that competition wasn't theft. That similarity in code was inevitable in the tech industry. That Meridian was a bully trying to crush smaller competitors. I spoke for 90 minutes. I walked the jury through the evidence. The timeline of the theft. The emails from TechFlow engineers. The financial records showing they knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't about competition, I said. This is about a company that couldn't innovate, so they stole. They took 3 years of research, 3 years of development, 3 years of investment, and they copied it. As they could. Because they thought Meridian wouldn't fight back. I looked at Sarachin. They were wrong. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. We waited in the courthouse library. Sarah paced. Patricia reviewed notes. I stared out the window and tried not to think about my mother's face in the gallery. At 4:47 p.m. the bailiff found us. Jury's back. The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled. Reporters in the back row. Tech industry observers. Law students. Mom was there. 3 rows back. Next to Stephanie. Judge Whitfield entered. All rise. We stood. The jury filed in. I tried to read their faces. Impossible. Judge Whitfield addressed the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Please read it. In the matter of Meridian Technologies versus TechFlow Solutions, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Meridian Technologies. Sarachin grabbed my hand. We award damages in the amount of $180 million. The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitfield banged his gavel. Order. But I barely heard him. We'd won. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters. Cameras. Sarachin gave a statement about protecting innovation. I stood back and let her have the moment. Patricia hugged me. You did it. Biggest verdict in the firm's history. We did it, I corrected. My phone was exploding. Texts from colleagues. Congratulations. Interview requests. And one from Mom. Can we please talk? I found her waiting by my car. Stephanie stood next to her, arms crossed. Rebecca, Mom began, I need you to understand. You excluded me from Easter, I said. You told me I'd be awkward. Embarrassing. That Richard's colleagues didn't need to meet the complicated family situation. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? She fumbled for words. I just thought, with the divorce and you being so busy with work, it would be easier if I wasn't there. If we kept things simple. I'm your daughter, Mom. I'm not a complication. Stephanie stepped forward. You made Richard look bad in there. In front of his colleagues. That motion for recusal was humiliating. He created the conflict. I addressed it appropriately. You could have handled it quietly. There's no quiet way to handle a judge discussing your case with family the night before trial. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know it was a problem. He barely said anything. Mom, he's a federal judge. He knows better. And so do you. I unlocked my car. Rebecca, please, Mom said. Richard is devastated. He thinks you hate him. I don't hate him. I don't know him. He wants to get to know you. He wants to be part of your life. Then he should have invited me to Easter. I got in my car. Stephanie knocked on the window. You're being childish. This is about a holiday dinner. I rolled down the window. No, Stephanie. This is about 38 years of being treated like I don't measure up. Like my career doesn't matter. Like my life choices are embarrassing. That's not fair. Isn't it? When I made partner, Mom asked if it meant I'd have less time for family. When you got promoted at the PTA, she threw you a party. When I won the Barrett Award for Litigation Excellence, she said it sounded stressful. When your kids learned to read, she posted about it for a week. Stephanie's face flushed. I'm happy for you, I continued. I'm happy you have the life you want. But I'm done apologizing for having the life I want. I drove away. The Meridian verdict made national news. Largest IP theft award in Western District history. Precedent-setting for tech industry. My phone didn't stop for a week. New client inquiries. Partnership offers from bigger firms. Speaking invitations. Patterson and Clark's revenue projections for next year doubled. Mom sent me a long email. An apology. An explanation. Richard had been horrified when he understood what he'd done. He'd meant no harm. She'd meant no harm. They wanted to make it right. I wrote back, I appreciate the apology. I need some time. Stephanie sent nothing. 3 weeks after the verdict, I got a letter. Handwritten. From Judge Whitfield. Dear Rebecca, I owe you an apology. Several, actually. First, for discussing your case with your mother, however briefly. It was inappropriate and showed poor judgment. You were right to call it out. Second, for excluding you from Easter. Your mother tells me she presented it as a joint decision. It wasn't. I suggested it might be awkward. I was wrong. It was cowardly. Third, for not making an effort to know you before I married your mother. I made assumptions based on her descriptions and your sister's comments. I assumed you were so focused on work because you struggled socially. I assumed the divorce meant you were fragile. Watching you in my courtroom corrected every assumption. You're brilliant. Commanding. Fearless. You ran circles around Morrison and Banks with a quarter of their resources. You protected your client, respected the process, and won decisively. Your mother is proud of you. She doesn't always know how to show it, but she is. I'd like to get to know you. Not as your stepfather. I haven't earned that title. But as someone who respects what you've built and wants to support it. If you're willing, I'd like to buy you dinner. No family. No agenda. Just conversation. Respectfully, Richard. I read it 3 times. Then I called him. Hello. He sounded nervous. Tuesday, I said. 7 p.m. There's a steakhouse near the courthouse. Neutral territory. I'll be there. And Judge Whitfield? Yes. Thank you for running a fair trial. Despite everything. There was a pause. Thank you for holding me accountable. Despite everything. We had dinner. It was awkward at first. Then easier. He asked about my cases. My career path. What it was like building a firm from scratch. I asked about the bench. About his career. About what he saw in my mother. She talks about you constantly, he admitted. She's so proud of you. She just doesn't know how to connect with what you do. She could ask. She could. She should. He paused. I think she's intimidated. By me. By your success. Stephanie's life makes sense to her. Yours is brilliant but foreign. She doesn't know how to be part of it. She could just be my mom. I'll tell her that. We met monthly after that. Dinners. Coffee. Conversations about law and life. Mom took longer. Our relationship was careful. Tentative. She tried. She asked about cases. She stopped comparing me to Stephanie. At Thanksgiving, which I was invited to, she introduced me to her friends as my daughter, the managing partner at Patterson and Clark. It was a start. Stephanie and I barely spoke. Some wounds take longer. But 6 months after the trial, she sent a text. Saw you quoted in the Times. Nice work. I wrote back, thanks. Small steps. As for me, I kept building. Patterson and Clark hired 15 new associates. Opened a 4th office. Our revenue hit $85 million. I won 3 more major trials. Made the National Law Journal's 40 under 40 list. And every time someone asked how I balanced it all, the career, the cases, the firm, I thought about Easter dinner. About being excluded because I was inconvenient. About walking into that courtroom and proving I belonged anywhere I chose to be. Balance. I'd say, I don't balance. I build. And I make no apologies for it. Because the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's building something so undeniable they have to recalibrate their entire understanding of who you are. And then choosing on your own terms whether to let them back in.